morning, good afternoon, good evening. I have often said on this platform that the Zanu PF dictatorship has not benefited anyone, including the ruling elite. Some people have disputed that. Well, here is one example. The gentleman I have in the picture there is the former Registrar General. He was in charge of the offices that produce the birth certificates, death certificates, and most important of all, the voters' roll in the conduct of the electoral process. He was a big shot during his time. And he certainly played his part in helping Zanu PF rig the elections and thus create and impose the Zanu PF de facto one-party state. At the time, no doubt, he benefited. He had his share of the spoils of power. But as the Shona would say, things change. And life has changed. He is not so cozy now. Let me say here and now, in 1980, when the country gained its independence, Zimbabwe had the potential of becoming the South Korea of Africa. Democratic, just, free, and competently run. Instead, we've become the North Korea of Africa. Mugabe and his Zanu PF cronies decided that they had the divine right to rule the country. And thus imposed the de facto one-party state on the nation. The ruling elite thought they would be okay. The Povo initially believed that they too would be okay. But as the economy started to struggle, the first people to be dumped was the Povo. And over the years, many of those who thought they were part of the ruling elite found themselves being dumped in turn. Zimbabwe is a failed state. And one of the consequences of a failed state is that millions are living in abject poverty. And some of the Zanu PF ruling elite are too living in abject poverty. The minute you lose your seat at the top table, you are in trouble. Here is a video of the former Registrar General Tobaiwa Mudede the gentleman who is doing the commentary is clearly not a fan of Mudede.
Dikaishandiswa neZanu paya kuanaunza maresults enhema Mudede muchamuziva here ainzi Mudede waishandiswa neZanu kunoanaunza maresults enhema ndiye Mudede kawo zvinotarisa zvaita akuita kunge demba riri mudovi. Wambona matemba akabikwa nedovi zvanenge akaita meso ari mudovi so achida kuona kuti musuwa uri kuuya ndewetaipi ipi.
Well, the former Registrar General is certainly not doing well at all. I had the opportunity to interview him in his office, the Registrar General's office. I wanted to interview him regarding the elections. He finally granted me the interview. And I asked him about postal votes. And he took great pleasure in explaining to me in the smallest details of who was entitled to a postal vote, how the postal votes can be applied for, when they come back, who opens those postal votes, how they are processed, etc., etc. I wasn't really interested in all that fluff. But I let him carry on. And then I finally asked him, in the Gweru Urban constituency, in the 1990 general elections, there were over 10,000 postal votes. When you consider that in a constituency, there are usually about 30,000 to 40,000 registered voters. 10,000 constituted nearly a third of the registered voter. In this particular case, nearly 10,000 had voted in that election. And those votes are what helped the Zanu PF candidate, Simon Muzenda, to win that election. The loser in that election was Patrick Kombayi of ZUM. And so I asked him, so what is so special about Gweru Urban that it should have so many postal votes? He was visibly annoyed by that question. And he started accusing me of having a hidden agenda. And he terminated the interview there and then because he didn't want to be misquoted. The truth of the matter is, he was surprised that I knew the exact figure of how many postal votes had been announced in that election. I had been to Gweru and I'd spoken to Patrick Kombayi himself, who had the figures and who gave me the figures. That was an example of how people like Tobaiwa Mudede helped Zanu PF rig the elections. Of course, he could not explain how any constituency could have so many postal votes. The postal votes were generated to help the Zanu PF candidate win that election, period. The tragedy, of course, is that people like Tobaiwa Mudede thought they were the true patriots, helping Zanu PF create and retain the de facto one-party state. The truth of the matter is they were creating a monster. Zimbabwe is a failed state because the country has been stuck with corrupt, incompetent, and vote-rigging Zanu PF thugs for 45 years and counting. While they are part of the ruling elite, people like Mudede never for a minute thought they would be anything but part of the ruling elite and continue to enjoy the good life. The moral of this story is that no one has benefited from turning Zimbabwe from its potential to become the South Korea of Africa to what it is today, the North Korea of Africa. And those who helped to create this dictatorship should now think about it, the role they played. But more so, there are people today who are still playing their role in sustaining this failed political system. The system has failed. Millions of our people are living in abject poverty. It is nonsense to believe that Mnangagwa will somehow turn around everything. He's not. All these cars that he's giving, dishing away as if there's no tomorrow, they're only to buy the votes. And those who receive them should know that they are playing their part in helping the dictatorship continue to survive. And as for the ordinary Zimbabwean out there who are easily conned, they should know that this is a situation that will only end in tears for everyone. The ruling elite themselves, they should know that the system is unforgiving. as the national cake shrinks, more and more of the ruling elite have got to be elbowed out of the way. That is the reality. It is tragic that Zimbabweans have taken so long to get to their senses and finally accept that the de facto one-party state is not working. Nobody is benefiting from it. And we should have the common sense to dismantle it. Yes, of course, for people like Tobaiwa Mudede, they played their role. And there's very little they can do now. Other than coming out and finally admitting that they were wrong. It will be a good gesture for people like him to come out in the open and admit the role that they played in creating and retaining the Zanu PF dictatorship, and apologize to the nation. It would be a noble thing to do. Thank you. Have a good day.